I just wanted to ask you, like, if you could define, if people don't know quantitative versus qualitative, what is your definition of it in someone who's just trying to understand those two different aspects and what it means?
So quantitative, we are not really interpreting the data, like we are not getting into deeper insights. So we are getting numbers, basically. So most of the data is going to be based on numbers, statistics, larger samples, and qualitative data, we are getting actually deeper insights, like we are understanding more deeply our users, like the motivations, the pain points, things like we can't really get with a number. And like the disadvantage, I mean, obviously with qualitative data is that it's subject to our own interpretation as well. And the big advantage in terms of quantitative is that it's more objective because it's usually based in numbers. So that's pretty much an overview.
Yeah, that's a great definition. Thank you.
We also need to understand the purpose of the metric, because some metrics are more user-centered and other metrics are actually business-oriented. But it's very important to actually measure both because they need to align. So we want to improve the experience for the users, but we also want to meet the business goals. So when you talk about user-centered, so we are talking about things, for example, is the user able to complete the task? Can the user achieve the goals easily? Can they do it quickly? And is the user satisfied with the experience? So all of these can be both attitudinal and behavioral, but they are much more user-centered. And on the other hand, we also need to think about business-oriented metrics, because all of these, is it translating into revenue? Are we having profitability? Are we converting? So it's very important to align both of these metrics, especially if we want to think about long term, about success in the business for the long term. A very popular framework is called Google's Heart Framework. And the great thing about this framework is that it's based on both attitudinal and also behavioral metrics. So it's really useful to use this framework. And I'm also going to give an example here. So we have different things we can measure. So we have happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. But obviously we need to be selective. So usually we pick, let's say, 2 of these aspects, and then we try to think about the goals, and again, thinking about what success means for us, and then the signals, and finally the metrics. So which metrics are we going to actually measure? So it makes it much easier doing like this. And let's say, for example, that we have a product, and according to our goals, according to our vision, we decide that we want to focus on, let's say, happiness and then task success. So in this case, we would be thinking about the goals that make sense for us to improve happiness for the users. So in this case, for example, the users would be satisfied with the in-app experience. So for us, that would mean this would be happiness. And how do we know this? Well, we want them to give positive feedback. And positive feedback can be a bit generic. Once again, it can be qualitative, it can be quantitative. So it's very important for us to be able to interpret the data and make it objective and quantifiable in this case. So this is actually asking you how likely are you to recommend. So this is based on the Net Promoter Score and also the customer satisfaction. How satisfied were you with your experience today? So again, I mean, we need to be careful because these metrics shouldn't be isolated. So of course, like, this is self-reported data. This is just what people tell us. But at the same time, it's a great way to keep your team on track. Like, there's that shared understanding. So, okay, we are improving relatively to how we started.
And I think that this type of scoring also is much more impactful when there's a larger audience or a larger poll, perhaps, than some of the qualitative data or some of the one-on-one research. I feel like that sometimes people are like, how many surveys do I need to feel like this is a great, or that this is a score that I should really think is accurate? What are your thoughts on that for this type of polling? Do you have like any idea for a good amount or a good number?
That's a great question. I would say not less than 50, 100, like to think about statistically significant results. So overall, so it's important that UX designers know how to use metrics because we are going to need to measure success and we are going to need to show business impact. So it's really important that we know how to use metrics. Metrics allow us to quantify the results, but they don't tell us the why. So they are important, but they're not everything. And it's essential to be able to complement these metrics with qualitative data.
For our own self, it actually feels really good to benchmark your whatever new designs you've done or any iterations you've done to previously. So that actually does feel, whenever I've seen an improvement, man, it makes me feel like, wow, I really made a difference. That's sometimes overlooked as well, or maybe people feel afraid to see those numbers. But it's always good to actually be exposed to that and to say, hey, maybe this didn't work. Let's go back and figure this out again. But always having that benchmark for yourself individually to feel good about your work, as well as obviously for the business as well.
Absolutely. Yes, completely agree.